Section 8.3 is just a continuation of Section 8.2 where we were multiplying, but in this case we're going to look at special products, and the best way to do this is to look at examples. So these are going to be certain situations where we're going to continue to multiply. It'll just be slightly different than what we did in the last section. So here's example number 1, and the instructions are still to find the product. So we have part A, 2x plus 5 squared. The biggest misconception is that you're just going to distribute the square to the 2x and the 5. But 2x plus 5 squared actually means 2x plus 5 times 2x plus 5. So what we're going to have to do is take each term in the first parenthesis and multiply by each term in the second parenthesis, just like we did in the last section. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 5 is 10x. 5 times 2x is 10x, and 5 times 5 is 25. So again, we would just combine like terms. So we'd have 4x squared plus 20x plus 25. So this would be the product. If all we had done is distribute the square to the 2x and the 5, we would have just ended up with the 4x squared and the 25, and we would have lost that middle term. So remember, do not just distribute the square to the 2x and the 5. That literally means 2x plus 5 times 2x plus 5. It's the plus sign that makes it impossible to just distribute that squared on the outside, like we did in the last chapter. Let's look at part B. We have 3x minus y squared. So remember, don't just distribute the squared. This literally means 3x minus y times 3x minus y. So what we're going to do is distribute both terms in the first parenthesis to both terms in the second parenthesis. So it's just a binomial times a binomial. So 3x times 3x is 9x squared. 3x times negative y, it would just be a positive times a negative, so it'd be negative. And then there's nothing to multiply by the 3, so it's just a 3. And then x times y is just xy. And always put it in alphabetical order. Then we have the negative y times 3. So a negative times a positive is a negative. There's nothing to multiply this 3 by, so I'm just going to continue with the 3. And then y times x is y times x. But we typically put them in alphabetical order. So if I'm going to take y times x, I'm going to write it as x times y. And then finally, I would have negative y times negative y. So a negative times a negative is a positive, and y times y is y squared. So now, after I've distributed everything, I'm going to combine like terms. So I would have 9x squared, and then negative 3xy minus 3xy would be negative 6xy, and then I would just have that plus y squared. So again, this would be the product. And again, if I had just distributed the square like many of you may be misconceived, we would have lost that middle term that we needed if we actually did it the correct way. And now on to example number 2. The instructions are still to find the product. For part A, we have r plus 3 times r minus 3. So what makes this a special product is that it's basically the same parenthesis times the same parenthesis, except the difference is one's a plus sign and one's a minus sign. So just like always, we're going to distribute. So r times r is r squared. R times negative 3 would be negative 3r. 3 times r would be plus 3r. And then 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. So when we go to combine like terms this time, the negative 3r and the positive 3r would cancel each other out, and we would end up with r squared minus 9. So in this case, our middle term actually drops out because one was a plus sign and one was a minus sign, so they cancel each other out after we distributed. So for part B, let's look at how that would turn out. 4x plus y times 4x minus y. So again, it's basically the same parenthesis, just one has a plus sign, one has a minus sign. So we would expect, just like in the last example, that middle term is going to cancel out. So let's see if that's what happens. 4x times 4x would be 16x squared. 4x times negative y, that would be negative 4xy. Remember, write it in alphabetical order. Then I'm going to take y times positive 4x, so it would be plus 4xy. Remember, even though the y came first, I'm going to put it in alphabetical order and put xy instead of yx. And then y times negative y would be negative y squared. So just like we assumed, the negative 4xy and the positive 4xy are going to cancel each other out, leaving me with 16x squared minus y squared. So again, these are special products because that middle term ends up dropping out. That's actually it for this section. Make sure you jot down anything you did understand that we can go over in class before we move on, and we'll see you then.